Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very, very special episode of Tarnished Bronze, where we're going to be delving into one of the very, very finest non-superhero comics, and that, of course, is Button Man by John Wagner and Arthur Ranson. And I've shown here the cover of the collected graphic album from Kitchen Sink Press, released earlier in the perhaps the mid '90s. Button Man is a sort of curious comic. I think it was designed for not to be in 2000 AD, which is, of course, the weekly British anthology series, but rather some sort of other anthology. And it's very peculiar because it doesn't have any science fiction or fantasy elements. And of course, science fiction and fantasy are kind of the lifeblood of 2000 AD, all the way back to, of course, the number one dinosaur strip and the Dan Dare and Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog strips, which amongst others, including Rogue Trooper, which I think will soon be a movie, which characterized this and of course some Alan Moore stuff which characterized 2000 AD. So John Wagner you probably know from the creator of Judge Dredd and the co-creator of Judge Dredd and the co-creator of Strontium Dog. But he's also done a lot of other work, including a whole host of original graphic novels, as well as a collaboration with Alan Grant, which also crossed over into the United States with a run on Batman or Detective Comics. Um, my first sort of John Wagner stuff probably would have been one of the Fleetway collections from the early '90s of the Judge Dredd in a normal comic conventional sized issues that I probably got in Australia. Arthur Ranson, by contrast, is much more of a sort of not obscure figure, but more of a figure who delved in and out of comics. He's got an astonishing array of and art, illustration and art credits behind his name. And his major contribution to comics involves the Look In series, which is a biographical series. I think there's some done on the Beatles, and they look phenomenal. And you can see from this cover here, he does have a really illustrative sort of photographical style, which is not to say it's all posed. It's very dynamic, but he does have a great ability to be able to convey exactly what likenesses that he's trying to convince people. Um, US audiences might know him from some X Factor stuff. You might know him from a few Legends of the Dark Knight and some covers here and there, but he hasn't really sort of done too much US based work. What I first kind of got struck by is some late '90s issue of 2000 AD, which included the series Maze World, which is another astonishing saga. And I later delved into some back issues with Anderson's Side Division, which is obviously the more out there, cerebral X-Files style episodes of the Judge Dredd verse, where Judge Cassandra Anderson is involved with hunting the sort of psychological and psychic phenomena in the Judge Dredd universe. And we'll probably cover that on the channel, to be honest. But this Button Man is perhaps the finest example of comics for non-comics readers, and I say that because it's far less stylized than the Akiras of this world, the Sin Cities of this world, and the Sandmans of this world. This is something that you can actually give to an everyday reader, and they'll really get along with. And in my mind, it's far superior to things like Wanted, and Criminal, which are in the same vein, but still a far more stylized. I first got in touch with Button Man on some magazine issues, which is a monthly Judge Dredd magazine, or a magazine sort of format, large scale format, and it often has some reprint strips. And in around 2001, 2002, there was a host of it that had reprints of the Button Man stories. and they really take you away. The artistry in these is superb. And to be honest, I read them in the Button Man issues, and then I kind of moved on to the 2000 AD contemporary comics, which had Button Man 4. So there's three of these. We'll just cover the first one today. But as you can see, this highly illustrative, highly realistic sort of world, and like I said, it's kind of bereft of any of the fantasy and science fiction that that engages in the 2000 AD sort of world, but it doesn't mean that it's devoid of ideas and tells a straightforward story. Indeed, the opening line of this is basically Harry Exton, our main character, the blonde guy here, saying, "I can't stop killing people. They won't let me." And then we delve into this whole rigmarole of psychology and violence and choice and morality, and it really is it's a very strong series, and the artistry here, it's like I've said, it's just magnificent. So the overall story is basically a former mercenary is recruited by his friend Carl into this sort of curious milieu of basically down and out hardened criminals or former military types. And the goal of these sort of people, and they're called the Voices, is if you own a football team, if you own a thoroughbred breeding stable, the next sort of thing is to own a stable of men who are going to kill for you. And that's what the game is. And so the Voices fix the game. Sometimes it's one-on-one, sometimes it's teams, sometimes it's a whole bunch of people on one. And the way that they kind of keep score is if you're going to be tagged or killed, then you lose a finger. So far, so good. But if you lose two fingers, the next one that you lose, regardless, is that's it. You're executed. And often some of these people are just executed straight up. And these sort of games are taking place in suburban areas. They're taking place on farms. They're taking place on downtown streets. They're also taking place in more remote locales where the fixers of the game, the Voices, can watch. And we've got a scenario here out on the moors somewhere where Arthur Ranson is kind of portraying this game as something that the people in the helicopter can actually watch. And I will say here that the lettering is actually drawn into these comics, so it makes it a really intrinsic part of the comic itself. And the dynamism and the kind of like breathlessness at which some of these scenes are taken, it is very, very strong. The suspense in this is exemplary. The visuals are superb, and you can see here this illustrative background of Arthur Ranson. You can kind of see the reflection in the pool here as he's going to visit this particular person. It's very well done, and it's cinematic, not in the sense that Brian Hitch is cinematic with his always sort of widescreen panels. It's cinematic in the sense that the pacing provides tension, the plot provides tension, and the visuals have ambiguity where they need ambiguity, which means that when all of a sudden the ambiguity or the curtain is raised from the reader's eyes, it really, really hits hard. And that's not something to do. And that just makes this a really compelling work. I want to just stop showing things there. You can find this comic out there in a collected edition, but I have to recommend this oversized kitchen sink version. So this is quite an oversized version. I have a normal comic that I can just point right now to kind of show the normal size of this. And it's not lavish. Mine is just a soft cover. I probably picked it up for a few dollars. It's really well read. I don't think the other series are all in that format, but it's absolutely astonishing. You can probably pick up a hardcover. The panels in here are amazing. The settings are amazing. There's a lot of these just individual panels that are probably worthy of spreads that just are really rocking, really evocative, and the oversized nature of this just makes it just look and come across as being absolutely superb. You may be able to find a few celebrity lookalikes in this sort of issue, but just once again, magnificent. And John Wagner is no slouch when it comes to storytelling. He's been doing this for sort of 50 years. And the whole series is kind of, like I said, it's a reflection on morality, and it's astonishing to me that, I mean, John Wagner has a book called A History of Violence, right? But he also has these characters that he's created that are extremely violent. So you've got Judge Dredd and the Judge Dredd world. You've got Johnny Alpha from Strontium Dog and that post-apocalyptic Earth that goes on there. And then you've also got Harry X from Button Man, The Killing Game. Now, one might say, though, that out of all of those characters, Judge Dredd, Johnny Alpha, and Harry Exton, Harry Exton is a peculiar kind of person because he's totally amoral, he's totally callous, and he's very, very heartless. So he kills and thinks nothing of it, where what's perhaps more of a poor reflection of society is that Judge Dredd kills, his word is the law, I am the law. But he actually, especially in the more extreme versions of his characterization, believes in that system that he's trying to uphold. And I know in more recent times it's a bit more ambiguous than that, and he does have some doubts. But he nonetheless is a defender, a staunch defender of this worldview, where Harry Exton just lives in our world and does terrible, terrible things, and you love every second of it as far as the story. So I want to leave it there. High recommendation of John Wagner, Arthur Ranson, and Button Man, especially if you can find one of these secondhand kitchen sink editions. So thanks again for tuning in. This has been Tarnished Bronze, and like, follow, and subscribe. There's plenty more videos out there, and we will see you very soon.